My name is Aaron Blake, and I haven't stepped foot in a desert since the day I found a photo of myself standing somewhere I've never been, surrounded by things that should not exist. I was 23 when I signed up for a desert survival retreat in Arizona. The program promised a week-long escape from modern life, no phones, no GPS, just a paper map, a compass, and enough dried food and water tablets to keep us alive. They said it would change the way we saw the world. I wasn't looking for peace or self-discovery. I wanted to prove something. I had always been the guy who took the easy way out, the guy who backed down when things got tough. I thought if I could survive a week alone in the desert, I could finally shake that feeling of weakness that had followed me for years. They dropped participants off in pairs, miles apart from each other, just outside a dried-up riverbed known as Red Hollow. When the transport truck stopped, they handed me my supplies and map and pointed toward my assigned area. My partner never showed. There was some confusion, a brief argument over the radio, and then a shrug from the guide. "You'll be fine solo. Just stick to the markers." I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe it was better this way. No distractions, just me in the desert. The first night was uneventful. I pitched my small one-man tent beneath a slanted rock outcrop, cooked a few spoonfuls of rehydrated stew, and watched the sun disappear behind the red cliffs. The desert got cold fast. I wrapped myself in a thermal blanket and tried to sleep, the silence pressing down like a weight. I woke up a few times, thinking I heard shuffling outside, but I blamed it on the wind, or maybe lizards. The second morning, as I packed my gear, I noticed something strange. Footprints in the sand around my tent. Not just mine, there were others. The tread pattern was different. I bent down, comparing them to my boots. These were smoother, older maybe, and they circled the tent twice before stopping right at the entrance flap, like someone had stood there, just staring in. I felt a chill, even in the rising heat of the morning. I told myself it was probably from one of the instructors checking in during the night. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. That night I set up a makeshift tripwire using twigs and a strip of foil from my emergency blanket. If anything came close to my tent, I'd hear it. I barely slept, every sound making my heart jump. In the morning, the foil was torn, the wire was broken, and the same footprints were back. They didn't lead to or from the tent, just around it, in a strange looping pattern, like the person or thing had appeared and vanished without a trace. I left camp early that day, moving faster than I should have in the heat. My throat was dry, and my limbs felt heavy. About an hour into my hike, I spotted something in the distance, a figure standing still on top of a dune, facing my direction. They were far off, just a dark shape against the sunlit sand, but I could tell they weren't moving. I raised my hand to signal. "Nothing," I shouted, my voice thin and dry. Still nothing. I blinked against the sun, wiped my eyes, and when I looked again they were gone. No movement, no trace, just empty sand. I turned around and went back to my original camp. My nerves were shot. I launched the emergency flare as soon as the sun started to dip behind the hills. I didn't care about finishing the program anymore. I wanted out. But just as I was packing my things, I saw something hanging near the flap of my tent, a small animal skull tied with a strip of leather. It hadn't been there before. I hadn't seen or heard anyone. My mouth went dry. I didn't touch it. I just sat outside, gripping my survival knife, watching the edges of the dark. The rescue crew arrived early the next morning. I didn't say much until we were safely inside the truck. When I told one of the crew about the footprints, the broken wire, and the skull, he didn't react the way I expected. He didn't laugh or call me paranoid. He just leaned in and said something low, like he didn't want the others to hear. "You're lucky you didn't camp near the caves." When I asked why, he stared out the window and mumbled, "They don't like strangers." I thought he was joking, but days later, back home, I searched online for Red Hollow. There were stories, old local ones. Hikers who disappeared, campsites found abandoned. Tales of desert spirits or shapeless things that watched from a distance. One name came up more than once, the Pale Watcher, shadows that looked human but had no faces. I didn't believe any of it. Not really, until I checked my phone. Before I left, I'd taken a few selfies, even though we were supposed to avoid electronics. In one of them, a sunset glowing behind me. There's a shape tall and still standing just behind my shoulder. I never heard it, never felt it, but it was there, watching. I was hired by a real estate company to photograph abandoned properties across southern Nevada. Most of the locations were old mining settlements or trailer homes left to rot under the desert sun. I was paid well, and the job seemed simple: drive, shoot, document, leave. On paper, it looked like easy money. But the desert has a way of turning quiet jobs into something else. There was one location I hadn't seen before, just a small red pin dropped deep in the Amargosa Valley. No structures were listed, just the words, "Remains of property." It took me 4 hours to reach the general area. There were no proper roads, only dust trails and faded tire tracks. I parked the SUV beside a cracked wooden fence that enclosed nothing. No house, no foundation, just dry earth and a single metal pole rising from the ground. I got out with my camera and stood still for a moment. The wind was strong, carrying that dry electrical scent of a storm that never comes. I checked my GPS. The pin was accurate. This was the place. I circled the area, looking for anything worth photographing. Eventually, I found pieces of concrete half buried in sand, and what looked like broken ceramic tiles, maybe from a bathroom or kitchen. I took some wide-angle shots, then zoomed in on the fragments. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the ceramic pieces had tiny, carved writing on it, not printed but scratched in, like someone had used a knife. It looked like a name, but it was incomplete. Just the letters Eli and then a deep, jagged line where the tile had snapped. I pocketed it out of curiosity and moved toward the pole. It looked like it had once held a sign. Now, just rust and bolts. But the earth around it was disturbed, like it had been dug up and refilled. Something about it made me uneasy. I knelt down, brushed away the top layer of dust, and uncovered what looked like a corner of a metal sheet. As I tried to lift it, a sour metallic smell rose from underneath. I stopped immediately. I told myself it was probably just old piping or septic equipment, but something about that smell, thick, oily, almost sweet, reminded me of decay. I stood up and decided I had enough shots. As I turned to leave, I spotted something out of the corner of my eye. A figure. It was standing far out in the flatness, near the shimmer of the horizon, too far to see clearly. I lifted my camera to zoom in. The person, or whatever it was, stood completely still, arms by its sides, facing directly toward me. No movement. I took a photo. As I adjusted the focus, the camera glitched just for a second. The figure vanished. I looked up again with my eyes. Nothing. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I felt something shift behind me. Not a sound, just a pressure, like the air was being pulled in. I backed away toward my SUV, walking fast but not running. The sky was turning darker, not with clouds but with this strange, faded gray tint that made everything look colorless. I started the engine and drove fast, following the path I'd come from. My GPS began lagging. The little triangle kept blinking and jumping backward, like I hadn't moved at all. Eventually I found the main road again and didn't stop until I reached the town border. That night, I reviewed the photos on my laptop. Most were fine blown-out shots of broken tiles and scorched land. But one of them, the shot I'd taken when I saw the figure, looked completely different on my screen. The figure was closer, much closer than I remembered, standing no more than 30 feet from me. And it wasn't just standing anymore. It was leaning, slightly tilted, with long arms and a blurred, stretched face. Its hands were open, fingers impossibly long, touching the air like it was reaching through the frame. I deleted the photo immediately. But the next morning when I opened my laptop, it was back. Same image, but this time the figure was gone. What was left was worse. The ceramic tile I had pocketed was sitting next to my laptop, now whole again, unbroken. The letters had changed. No longer Eli. It now read, "Hello. I used to drive long-haul trucks across the Southwest, mostly hauling construction equipment through endless stretches of sand and silence. Nights on the road didn't bother me. I actually preferred them. Less traffic, cooler air, fewer distractions. I'd seen everything the desert had to offer. Mirages, dust storms, jackrabbits darting across empty highways. But there was one night that made me rethink all of it. One route I'll never take again. I was running behind on a delivery near the Arizona-New Mexico border. To save time, I decided to cut through a lesser-known desert pass that reconnected to the interstate. I'd used it once before during the day. It was rough, mostly dirt and gravel, but I remembered it being manageable. That night, with the sky clear and the moon bright, I figured it would be fine. I topped off my tank, checked the rig, and turned onto the pass just after midnight. The first hour was uneventful. The road wound through jagged rock formations and dry riverbeds. No signs, no lights, just the steady hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on dirt. But after a while, I noticed something strange. My odometer wasn't increasing. It had been stuck at the same mile count for a while. I glanced at the GPS. The route tracker had frozen. No signal. I figured it was just a dead zone, but something about it made me uneasy. I kept driving, trusting my memory. Eventually, I passed a rusted-out pickup truck on the side of the road. It looked ancient, like it hadn't moved in decades. No windows, no tires, just a shell. I didn't remember seeing it the last time I came through. A few minutes later, I saw another. This one was flipped over, half buried in the sand. The paint was scorched, and something dark had dried around the edges. I slowed down. The area felt off, like it was stuck in time. Every so often, I passed more wrecks, cars, trucks, even a burnt-out bus. None of them were recent. All of them pointed in the same direction I was going, as if they'd been traveling the same road. As I drove by one of the cars, I saw something move in the rearview mirror. A shadow, quick and fluid, like it had darted between the wreckage. I stopped the truck and listened. Nothing, just the low howl of wind. I told myself it was nerves, maybe a desert fox or a coyote. But as I started moving again, I noticed something else. Every few minutes, the temperature in the cab would drop rapidly, then rise again, like I was passing through pockets of cold air. My windshield began to fog, which made no sense given the dry heat. Then I saw the first person. They were standing in the middle of the road, far ahead, motionless. I hit the brakes and honked. No reaction. I flicked the high beams on and off, still no movement. When I got closer, they stepped to the side without looking at me. Just moved into the darkness like they were being pulled away. I didn't stop again. More figures appeared the farther I went, all just standing off to the side. Men, women, children, all deathly still. No expression, no detail, just shadows shaped like people. I stopped looking at them altogether and kept my eyes on the road. After what felt like hours, the road opened up and reconnected to the main highway. My GPS came back to life, but when I looked at the screen it didn't match my location. It showed my truck still on the dirt road surrounded by red hazard symbols. Then it blinked once and updated. I was 84 miles farther than I should have been. I pulled over at a rest stop, hands shaking. I got out, lit a cigarette, and tried to calm down. The desert was silent again, just wind, sand, and stars. I walked to the back of my rig to check the cargo. There were handprints on the back door, smudged small like a child's, and something had been written in the dust beneath them. Turn back. I never reported it. I told the company I got delayed in a sandstorm, but to this day, I wonder how many other drivers have taken that road, seen those cars, those people, and never made it out. In the summer of 2019, I took a temporary job as a wildlife surveyor assisting a research team in Death Valley. The work was repetitive, installing and checking motion-sensitive cameras, tracking wildlife movement, and making notes on environmental conditions. Most of the team stayed at a research outpost near Furnace Creek, but I was assigned to a remote monitoring zone close to an old, disused airstrip. It was nearly 30 miles from the nearest paved road, and nobody liked being assigned there. They joked about it, saying the animals out there didn't want to be watched. I didn't laugh. Something about the area made people uneasy. My first trip out was uneventful. I installed 4 cameras, each several hundred yards apart, mounted on iron posts buried deep in the sand. They were set to record any movement larger than a rabbit. I marked their locations, snapped some photos, and hiked back to the ATV. The heat was relentless, but I'd grown used to that. What I wasn't used to was the silence. No birds, no insects, not even wind. It was the kind of silence that feels too heavy, like the desert was holding its breath. 3 days later I returned to retrieve the memory cards. I followed the GPS coordinates, but the first camera was gone. Just the post remained, twisted and leaning. The bolts had been ripped out of the ground. I assumed a dust storm had torn it loose, until I noticed something that didn't make sense. Drag marks in the sand, not away from the camera, but toward it, as if something had come to it, not taken it. In 2019, I was working a short-term job as a wildlife surveyor in Death Valley. My job was to set up motion cameras, track animals, and collect data. Most of the team stayed near Furnace Creek, but I got assigned to a remote area near an old airstrip. Nobody liked going there. It felt strange, quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. The first trip was fine. I placed 4 cameras and returned. 3 days later I went back to collect the memory cards. The first camera was missing. The metal pole was still there, bent like something had pulled it out violently. There were drag marks in the sand heading toward the pole, not away from it. The second camera was still there but knocked over. The lens was cracked. I picked up the card and continued walking. Halfway to the third camera, I noticed something half buried in the sand. It was a small leather notebook, old and dusty. Inside was strange symbols and drawings, faceless figures standing alone or in uneven circles. One page had something written in English, scratched and deep. They don't show up in the sun. I looked again at the drawings. None of the figures had shadows. I quickly packed the notebook and kept moving. The third and fourth cameras were also damaged. I collected the cards and left fast. The air felt heavy, like something was watching me from the rocks. Back at the outpost I loaded the footage on the computer. Everything looked normal at first: lizards, rats, coyotes, but at 3:17 a.m. something appeared on every camera at the same time. Tall, thin figures, all black. They didn't walk, they glided. 1 second the cameras showed empty land. The next second the figures were there, standing still. No sound, no movement. One figure got closer. Its arms were too long, bending the wrong way. The footage glitched and turned to static for 3 minutes. When it came back, the figure was gone, but the area looked different. A plant was missing. Rocks had moved. A new, perfect hole was in the ground. I showed my supervisor. She looked at one clip, closed her laptop, and said quietly, "We don't talk about it, just move the zone." That was it. No explanation, just silence. A week later I opened the notebook again. I noticed something I missed before. On the back cover, lightly carved into the leather, was my name. Spelled perfectly. I never told anyone. In 2021, I went on a solo camping trip to the Sonoran Desert. I had read about an old meteorite crater near the Arizona-Mexico border. I enjoy being alone in places like that. No phone, no people, just the sky and silence. I hiked a few miles and found the crater. From a distance it looked normal, but standing near it, I felt pressure in my ears, like standing next to a speaker with no sound. I set up camp near a flat rock and waited for night. The stars were beautiful, so many, so clear I took long exposure photos, but each picture had a strange blur. Always the same shape, like a smoky human figure standing near the rocks. I deleted them, thinking it was a lens issue. Around 3 a.m., I woke up. I heard slow footsteps on the gravel outside my tent. One step, then another, then silence. I didn't move, just waited until sunrise. When I got out, I noticed something terrifying. No footprints, not even mine. The sand was smooth, but near the tent flap were prints going out of the tent, none coming in. I should have left, but something made me stay. That day, I climbed a ridge and saw something I hadn't noticed before, a perfect circle in the sand. No plants, no stones, just smooth ground. In the center was a black, glassy stone, cold to the touch. It didn't feel natural. I took a few pictures and returned to camp. That night I saw a pale glow from the ridge. I went to check. The circle was glowing. The sand itself was moving, shadows shifting below the surface. The stone was gone. In its place stood a figure, tall, still, head without features, arms too long. It just stood there, facing me. As I backed away, I saw more figures rising from the sand all around the crater. Dozens, maybe hundreds, watching me. I ran to my truck and drove without stopping, following the stars until I hit pavement. At home, I checked the photos. All of them looked normal. No circle, no stone, no figure except one. One photo I never took. It showed me standing in the center of the circle. My eyes were completely black. Behind me stood blurred, shadowy figures. The date on the photo, 3 days before I ever arrived.